Now, Jack, good to see you here. You can talk to this one. This has got to be probably the most important reason of the 11 why we did make it to the moon. As I said, I was responsible for the alarm system. And in that capacity, I was supposed to know when master alarms would come on. And so because of the Apollo 1 fire, Army did it. I don't know if anybody knew Army did it. He worked in ASPO. He and I would go around and visit with all the lunar landers' subsystem managers. So we would go over the alarm criteria. But one thing I never understood was anything about the program alarms at all. It was too complicated. It would take somebody like Jack. I know. Ken, are you here? I don't know if Ken's here. I invite, hey, not you. Ken Goodwin.
I'm back here.
Okay, come on up here, Ken. I just wanted you to talk to me. Now, Ken, the reason I want Ken to come, and perhaps, Jack, you can give us a word, too, since you're the one that really is responsible for this. But Ken and I met at a friend's wedding here last week. I asked him to share just a little bit from the perspective of the Draper contract and so forth, what was going on in their minds that Jack rescued everybody from, okay? Could you give us a word? How's this? Can you hear us if I stand next to Ken? Okay. See, they're recording this, and I've got the mic right here on me. Okay.
Well, let's see. During the landing, we had a bunch of program alarms come up, and most of us, with the exception of Jack, had to pull out our cheat sheet to find out what this program alarm was that had come up. And sure enough, it was a request to the computer to come up with 101% effort, which most computers have the inability to respond to. I think, at least in my recollection, which has probably faded quite a bit since it happened, I think one of the responses that we had was Jack, from my memory, sat down a couple days before the launch and said, let's go through every alarm and let's come up with an action for it. And sure enough, since this rather uncommon alarm came up, we had at least thought about it for a couple seconds.
Well, let me tell you, the really funny story in this is that poor Steve called an abort on a simulation just a couple months before the flight, and he wasn't supposed to. And Gene Kranz started bawling the sim guys out about it, and they started bawling him about it, because it was supposed to be a survivable problem. And guess what it was? It was one of these program alarms. And what's even funnier was that because I was in the back room, I was allowed to play both sides. I helped set up that sim that Steve called the abort on, that caused Gene Kranz to tell me to go write down every possible program alarm and study them before the flight. And if Gene hadn't done that, we wouldn't have responded as quickly as we could to the problem. So, but yeah, it was overflow. The computer got too busy. Fortunately, the Draper guys had programmed the computer to restart, so it was not a major
But the one thing that may not be well known in the community was as soon as some of us had finally come to a realization at what had happened, we did, by the grace of God, land. And we sat and, collectively drew our breaths and then began to think about, gee, we've just had an executive overflow. NASA, in its wisdom, had a requirement on us that the computer would be required to do more than 85% of its total capability. Now, we would blip through that every so often, but generally, we were required to have a 15% reserve. We obviously didn't have that on the landing. And the first thing that hit most of us was we knew that the ascent program was far more demanding than the descent program. We barely made it down. How are we going to get back up again?
Wow.
Luckily, the solution was forthcoming in a couple hours as to what had happened. And it was one of those classic software mistakes, a last-minute change. Don't ever change your software in the last minute.
There we have. Give Jack and Ken a hand. Okay. Okay.